Shalom everyone, you're all here again for HebrewInIsrael.net. I hope you had a wonderful Shabbat, and I want to talk very quickly about the name Adonai in verse 3 of chapter 18 in Genesis. So one of the interesting dilemmas that we have regarding this name is the fact that you can actually argue that this is not a reference to God, but actually a reference to the people standing in front of Abraham. There's a big question: did Abraham actually know that they were messengers? And if he did know, then obviously he would refer to them as the messengers of God, the mouth of God, and therefore referring to them as if he's speaking to God directly would make a lot of sense. However, it's not really that simple, and several centuries ago, people were dilemmaed about this, and there actually are some discussions about this subject. So let's start off with an issue of grammar. One of the things that we have in Hebrew is we have a double sounding ah sound, very similar to English. You can have long ah versus short ah. The long ah is represented by the kamatz, which is a little t, while the short ah is presented by a patach. Now, the opening of chapter 18 starts with, and God appeared before Avraham, which makes it sound as if maybe Avraham was already in some kind of a discussion with God, or that this is a reference to verse 3, where that is the appearance of God. And there are different opinions about this. However, the problem that we have is with the name Adonai in verse 3. It seems to be pretty obvious that Avraham does not know that these were messengers of God, because he treats them as human beings. So why do we have an Adonai there with a kamatz? Now, for those who don't know, there is Adonai with kamatz, which is 100% throughout the Tanakh a reference to God, and it's a pluralization, but it's an exalted pluralization through putting a kamatz. A regular pluralization of Adon, which means Lord or Master, as a reference to a human being, would be done with a patach. In our case, there's a kamatz, but it's really not that simple. Now, why is it not simple? It's not simple because Avraham is clearly unaware of the fact that these were messengers of God. If he would have known, it would be very evident in the text, and he would not have this whole issue of giving them food and being there and serving them and so on. So how come is he talking as Adonai with a kamatz, which is obviously a reference to God? So here are the possible answers. Possibility number one is he was in the middle of a discussion with God, and verse 3 is referencing to the appearance, which is talked about in verse 1, maybe some kind of first appearance, and then verse 4 is the actual speech to the angels, to the messengers, where in verse 3 Avraham is basically saying, please, Lord, do not pass from upon your servant. I'll get back to you in a second, kind of, but I need to now speak with these people who have shown up at my doorstep. It's possibility number one. Possibility number two is that he is actually talking to these three men. However, the understanding is that it should be with a kamatz, and this is the majority opinion which appears in the tractate of Shavuot, page 35b, where they say all the names in Abraham are holy, which means that this should appear with a kamatz. The logic there is a little difficult, at least for me, because contextually he doesn't know that these are angels. He doesn't know. There's no real reference here that he's in the middle of a discussion with God. So what is the third possibility? The third possibility is disagreeing with possibility number two, which is that he was not speaking with God, or possibilities 1 and 2. He was not speaking with God and then referencing to the men. He actually, verse 1 refers to verse 3, that is the appearance of God, but he doesn't know it's the appearance of God. And actually, verse 3, the Adonai there should appear with a patach and not a kamatz, to indicate that he is speaking to the majority, to the men in front of him, and it should be Adonai as a regular pluralization. However, the rest of the verse, where we say, if I found favor in your eyes, enecha in the singular, al na ta'avo do not pass in the singular, ma'alavdecha from upon your servant, that the verse itself, because the problem that we have here is that if he's talking to them in the plural, why isn't the rest of the verse in the plural? Which leads a lot of people to say, okay, he is talking to God, because that will be in the singular. However, one can argue that what's actually going on here is that he's referencing to my lords, and then he's turning to the greater one amongst them as a way of politeness to speak to all three of them, but you speak to the greater one of all the three, the same way that, for example, if you're speaking to a king, you don't speak to a king and his servants, you speak directly to the kings, which should be in the singular. So these are some interesting points regarding this situation of the word Adonai here. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was clear enough. Any questions, anything not too sure about, let me know in the comments. Kol tov.